Greetings, brothers, sisters, and learned men. Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. 5 highest known principles to man. Today's reading will be coming from When Rocks Cry Out by Horace Butler. Okay, we chose chapter 7, the divine number 7. The Malaku key to the Aztecs. The Malaku key to the Aztecs. Okay? Let's go. Before I heard about the Cali, that's with a K, or saw the 5 letters of Cortez, a young Ethiopian working to earn her master's degree sent African history books to me. Martha Malaku had heard of my interest in early African history during conversations with my wife, who worked with the university's Africa program. One of the books the Ethiopian scholar sent contained an account of 2 transatlantic expeditions launched from Mali, a country in West Africa, written by Dr. Ivan van Cernema, a professor at Rutgers who had come from South America. The book included an account of African ships sent across the Atlantic Sea by a Mali king called Abu Bakr. Get it right, Mo. The ships were launched toward the Americas nearly 200 years before Columbus across that same sea. Let's say that again. The ships were launched toward the Americas nearly 200 years before Columbus went across that same sea. Okay? The 2 Atlantic Sea crossings by the Mali explorers became more important when I noticed that the Moorish Black Aztecs had arrived at Mexico in ships about the same time that Mali sent her ships across the Atlantic. Interesting. Van Cernema's book introduced those transatlantic voyages across the citations from Basil Davidson's The Lost Cities of Africa. Okay? Basil Davidson's The Lost Cities of Africa. I asked the Mali Sultan Musa how it was that power had come to his hands, and he replied, "We come of a house where royalty is transferred by heritage. The monarch who preceded me would not believe that it was impossible to discover the limits of the neighboring sea. He wished to know. He persisted in his plan. He caused the equipping of 200 ships and filled them with men, and another such number that were filled with gold, water, and food for 2 years. He said to the commanders, 'Do not return until you have reached the end of the ocean, or when you have exhausted your food and water.' They went away, and their absence was long. None came back, and their absence continued. Then a single ship returned. We asked his captain of their adventures and their news. He replied, 'Sultan, we sailed for a long while until we met with what seemed to be a river with a strong current flowing in the open sea. My ship was last. The others sailed on, but as each of them came to the place, they did not come back, nor did they reappear, and I do not know what became of them. As for me, I turned when I was and did not enter that current.'" The current of the Atlantic Pacific Ocean. Pacific. Van Cernema then gave a description of the second expedition sent out by Mali. King Abu Bakarbi abandoned Niani and journeyed with a greater part of his court to the plain at the western edge of Mali, where the first fleet had been fitted out and had disembarked. A vast army of craftsmen, dwarfing the planners and workers of the first expedition, were assembled on that plain. He had a special boat built for himself with a pimpi, that's P-E-M-P-I, on the poop deck, shaded by the bird emblazoned parasol. He would command the new expedition himself, keeping in touch with the captains of the fleet by means of the talking drums. Thus, in 1311, he conferred the power of the regency on his brother, Kakan Musa, on the understanding that Kakan was to assume the throne if, after a reasonable lapse of time, the king did not return. Then one day, dressed in a flowing white robe and jeweled turban, he took leave of Mali and sent out with his fleet down the Senegal, heading west across the Atlantic, never to return. He took his griot and half his history with him. Okay, let's continue. It is important to notice that, according to the Aztecs, there was only a short sequence of events between the arrival of the Aztecs and the building of the Aztec city, Tenochtitlan. In 1325, the Aztecs, or Mexica, were the last of the many nomadic tribes to enter the Valley of Mexico. They attempt to settle in one or another of the flourishing city-states, but whenever they appeared, they were violently driven away as undesirable foreigners. After a whole series of defeats and humiliations, the Aztecs succeeded in establishing themselves on an island in the lake. The beginnings of the Aztec capital were very humble. It was founded on a low-lying island so undesirable that other tribes had not bothered to occupy it. Is that so? The Mali expeditions and the arrival of the Aztecs occurred close enough in time to consider whether there was a connection between the two events. The Mali transatlantic voyage became critically important when I remembered that Montezuma had said the Aztecs were foreigners who arrived recently aboard ships that had come from the direction where the sun rises. What does the sun rise? Rises in the west, right? Sets in the east. Okay. Spanish writers who saw the Aztecs and who knew the Moors had revealed that the Aztecs even wore the same clothing used by the Africans called Moors. Why? Because they was the same people. Duh. Historians agreed that the Aztec capital city, Tenochtitlan, was built about 1325 AD. That date and a short series of events before 1325 do not exclude the Mali colonists and explorers who launched their 2 expeditions across the Atlantic Sea toward the Americas sometime between 1300 and 1312. There was one thing that bothered me about the Abu Bakr history being the history of the Moorish Aztecs. Montezuma, that's how it's spelled, y'all, stated that the great lord of his ancestors came on the first ocean voyage, and that this lord came again on another ship to take the people back to their homeland. Abu Bakr history states that the Mali leader did not come on the first expedition. He came with the second Mali expedition. If Montezuma meant that a leader and not necessarily the leader came with the first group, then there was no disagreement with the history from Mali. I was aware that facts often lose some of their accuracy over time. Still, this was possible discrepancy disturbed me. A month later, I found the Aztec history that removed the doubt regarding whether the Aztecs had association with Mali. According to a European friar, the Aztecs named their first colony Malaku. Malaku. It was no coincidence that people on an expedition from Mali would name their first colony Malaku. Just as it was no coincidence that England named this settlement New England, or that Spain named this land in America New Spain. The relationship between Mali and the Aztecs became clear when I saw that a translator put in his notes about Mali traditions, explaining his translation of Sana di Atta, an epic of Old Mali. The translator wrote, it has used this word Mandinko to mean the people who inhabited Mali in their language, as an adjective to mean anything pertaining to these people. The inhabitants of Mali call themselves Mandinka or Mandinka. Mali or Malinki are the Fulani deformations of the word. Manding, and Mandinka, respectively. It's not astonishing to find villages in Old Mali which have Mali for a name. This name could have formerly been that of a city. In Old Mali, there is one village called Malikoma. That explanation gave 2 valuable pieces of understanding. First, the name Mali was used with suffixes by Africans to name cities that could explain the name Malinako. The translator also explained the word Malinki. I have seen this word while reading Cortez letters. It was the name applied to the Aztec women who interpreted the Aztec language for Cortez. The Spaniards gained the Aztec women upon their arrival in Mesoamerica, and they renamed her Dona Marina. Dona Marina. When Spanish writers attempt to explain why the Aztec people referred to this native interpreter as La Malichi, the Spaniards reported that it was because the name meant Marina's captain. But the African descendants from Mali, the Aztecs, were simply calling the women what she was. The Malinke meaning the Mandinka. Further, since Cortez misrepresented himself as being sent by the ruler of the Aztecs' native homeland, Mali, the Aztecs sometimes sarcastically referred to him as a Mandinka too, calling him Malinche in jest. Just a joke with him. The Aztec and Mali histories appear to point to Mali as the original homeland of the Aztecs, especially when consideration was given to the dates of the Albuquerque expeditions, the date for the building of the Aztec capital city, and the names Malinco, and Manichi. Even the framed cliff caves of Mali were remembered in the Aztec histories, but the Aztecs were foreigners who had recently arrived. Now I want to know who the earlier people were who had built the ancient cities and pyramids in Mexico. The Aztecs said they didn't know who built the great pyramids at the old nearby city called Tenochtitlan. So, along the apparent Aztec-Mali associations, there stood great stone pyramids, hieroglyphs, and other things that seemed to point toward Egypt. I would have to find the history of the people who arrived before the late arriving Aztecs. Now, the prophet Noble Ali did state that there was pyramids up and down the Mississippi when the Europeans arrived here, and that the Mississippi River is the original Nile River. Memphis, Tennessee, with Memphis, the capital of Egypt, Memphis, Tennessee, and they have a pyramid in Memphis, Tennessee, as well as they found Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon area, all kind of temples down there, you name it. They also found, if you look on the exotic map of America, you'll find that Egypt now was also in Savannah, Georgia, ancient Egypt. So, this land is Tamari. North America is ancient Egypt. Okay? And that's what this book is basically telling you. As well as, the book that we read, we did a video on America BC. And when it was talking about the Mi'kmaq language, of the so-called Indians of North, the Algonquins, and they said they found, Egyptian-like writings up there, as far as Canada. Okay? All right. Let's continue, y'all. Most scholars who have studied the Maya and Aztec refuse to tell us that the Aztec arrived on the eastern shores of Mexico in ships. That history of arrival came directly from the Aztecs, so you would think it would be important to publicize that. I have never heard a scholar explain their silence about the transatlantic origins of the Aztecs, but a leading Mayanist confessed to me that no historian of the Maya who values their reputation and career would admit Africans were in the Americas before Columbus arrived. Hiding the pre-Columbian presence of Africans was not a new deceit. From the time the Spaniards arrived in Mexico, official efforts to erase the African presence were pursued with a vengeance. Historian William Prescott documented the erasing of the Africans. Their manuscripts were made of different materials, built for the most part of a fine fabric from the leaves of the aloe, called by the natives Magui. That's Maguey, which grows luxuriantly over the tabloids of Mexico. A sort of paper was made from it, resembling somewhat the Egyptian papyrus. At the time of the arrival of the Spaniards, great quantities of these manuscripts were treasured up in the country. The first Archbishop of Mexico, Don Juan de Zumarraga, collected these paintings from every quarter, especially from Texcoco, the most cultivated capital in Anahuac, and the great depository of the National Archives. He then caused them to be piled up in a mountainous heap, as it was called by the Spanish writers themselves, in the marketplace of Tacaloco, and reduced them all to ashes. Tlatelolco. The unlettered soldiers were not slow in imitating the example of their prelate. Every chart and volume which fell into their hands were wantonly destroyed, but destroying the books and paintings were not sufficient to erase the forbidden histories of the Americas. Records had also been carved, painted, and otherwise depicted on monuments, including temples that resemble hieroglyphic covered temples that ancient Egypt built in northeast Africa. Spain attacked the images on the temples in Mexico. Even the image of Montezuma was erased from history, Prescott wrote. See what they did? They demolished in a short time all the Aztec temples, great and small, so that not a vestige of them remained. Sculpted images were so numerous that the foundations of the cathedral in the Plaza Mayor, the great square of Mexico, are said to have entirely composed of them. The spot may indeed be regarded as the Aztec Forum, the great depository of the treasures of ancient sculpture, which now lay hid in its bosom. They buried them. Such monuments are spread all over the capital. However, a new cellar can hardly be dug or foundation laid without turning up some of the smoldering relics of the barbaric art. See what I'm saying? They buried them. Okay, let's move along. What is certain is that scholars who want to work at pre-Columbian ruins in Mexico, Central America, and South America often must get permission from Hispanic administrators in those countries. If there were some agreement between those governments to hide the history of the Africans, then what could their motive be? If there was no motive to deny the pre-Columbian African presence, why would a university professor deny an African presence in pre-Columbian America, then whisper in notes at the back of his published book that rulers of some of the most important Maya nations call themselves black rulers? Okay? All right, chapter 9. Europe called it the Black Legend. All right. I was awestruck when I saw how Cortez and his group marched into the Aztec capital, right into the middle of the Aztec strength. As I continued to read the accounts, my wonder became flooded with hatred. The chronicles began describing how the Spaniards butchered women, men, and children, or how they burned some elderly man while he was alive, all to uncover some piece of gold. It was not an insult to my senses alone when the barbarous cruelty and gluttonous behavior of the Spaniard soldiers were publicized. People throughout Europe began to scorn the name of Spain. The murderous expeditions became known around Europe as the Black Legend. The Black Legend? During a conversation with Montezuma in the Aztec palace, Cortez and his soldiers suddenly attacked this ruler, chained him, and threatened to kill him if he did not send messengers to bring gold. Then the Spaniards slaughtered a group of unarmed Aztecs to get the gold ornaments that adorned those celebrants who were performing religious ceremonies in the city. When news of this murder spread through the Aztec communities, the Africans called Aztecs launched an impassive attack against the Aztec palace where the Spaniards had fortified themselves. The attack was so fierce and fearful that Cortez was forced to abandon his kidnapping schemes against important Aztec dignitaries. According to one Aztec account, after threatening Montezuma to discover his private treasures of gold, the Spaniards then murdered him. Then night came. Cortez and his marauders attempt to sneak out of the city. A woman saw them and shouted out the alarm. During the fearful chase that followed, the Spaniards left gold, horses, soldiers, and anything else that slowed their flight from the city. Cortez, and according to some writers, only half his army escaped to the coast and waited there until more guns and cannons and soldiers arrived. Months later, Cortez led a second attack against the Aztec capital. This time, blasts from Spanish cannons leveled the wonder-filled city, and over 240,000 Mexicans were massacred. The original Mexicans. Aztecs. Right? Months later. So went part of this barbarous event called the Black Legend. Following the fall of the Aztec capital city, thousands of Mexican men, women, and even children were burned alive, decapitated, hung, or otherwise killed for failure to give gold to the Spaniards. Other Mexicans were chained and sent to Cuba as slaves. After the invasion and destruction of the Aztec Empire, Spain immediately began sending Spanish people into Mexico. In time, many of these Spanish colonists assumed the name of the conquered people. Let's say that again. In time, many of these Spanish colonists assumed the name of the conquered people, calling themselves Mexicans. You get it? Aware of the difference between the two groups of Mexicans, some writers from Mexico show their enlightenment by referring to the original Mexicans as pre-Hispanic Mexicans. Pre-Hispanic Mexicans. Ain't that something? Knowledgeable Hispanic writers even ridicule the famous Spanish army commander Santa Anna for claiming the heritage of the black Mexicans who battled Cortez. Into the genocide of the Black Legend stepped the Franciscan friar Bernardito de Sahagún. At the start of the search, the Special Collections Library had told me Sahagun was the authority on pre-Hispanic Mexico. Yeah, right. Peace, peace, peace and love. Show you that. Yeah. Similar, right? You know where Egypt was first? See that?